Welcome to Beyond the Surface. On our podcast, we highlight underrepresented voices in architecture. We'll humanize architects by uncovering who they are beyond the surface. Hi, I'm your host, Alex Sanchez, representing the Illinois Tech student chapter of the National Organization of Minority Architects. Today's episode is called Design for Reciprocity with our guest, Michel Rojkind. Michel is a Mexican architect and founder of Rojkind Arquitectos based in Mexico City. He studied architecture and urban planning at the Universidad Iberoamericana in Mexico City. He has been a visiting professor at numerous institutions, including the Institute of Advanced Architecture of Catalonia in Barcelona, SciArc, Illinois Institute of Technology, University of Pennsylvania, and Harvard University. He has served as a judge in multiple international awards and competitions and has given lectures around the world. In 2005, Architectural Record recognized Rojkind Arquitectos as one of the 10 leading design vanguard firms. In 2010, Michel was named as one of the country's treasured architects by the Mexican Civil Registry. He was named among the faces to watch in 2010 by Los Angeles Times, and he was selected by the Architectural League of New York as one of the emerging voices. The following year, Wallpaper magazine named him as one of the 100 movers, shakers, and makers that have rocked the world in the last 15 years. In 2013, Forbes magazine recognized him as one of the most influential architects in the contemporary Mexican scene. In 2017, the New York Times included him in a generation of architects making its mark at a dizzying speed. In 2022, Forbes Mexico included him in their edition of the 100 most creative Mexicans in the world. In 2023, for the fifth consecutive times, he was recognized by the magazine Líderes Mexicanos in their list, The 300. Thank you for being here with us today. It's a great honor to be able to have this conversation with you. You came to IIT last year and you taught, and I remember that you gave a lecture that I attended, and I think that lecture really impacted me in the way that I saw architecture. So it is great to have this conversation. With that being said, how are you feeling today?
Great, Alex. Thanks for inviting me, having me in the podcast. The experience in Chicago was amazing. I miss being in Chicago. I was traveling every other week. So, friends, colleagues, everything. I had a great time. So, happy to be here and talk a little bit more.
I'm glad you're here too. I know it's going to help a lot of students. I feel like we get listeners of different ages and different backgrounds and different career types. So I know this is going to be a really good episode for them. So we're going to start with your background. Can you tell us about your background and how that influenced your identity?
Well, I have a very atypical background. I started off as a musician back in the days. I was a drummer in a band. I started around 13 years old, and that led me to start playing with some other bands and to start acting a little bit more professional. And then by the time I was playing on all these like clubs in Mexico, because there was a very important movement back in the days called rock en español, rock in Spanish, where a lot of bands were now speaking in Spanish because before you, if you didn't play in English, nobody would go and see you. You know, you had to do cover songs. So rock en español created like a super big movement. And I was part of that movement with these rock bands in Mexico. And so we were signed with Virgin Records or EMI Capital back in the days, because then it changed to Virgin Records with my band. So I was in first semester of architecture school and I was already signed with a record label. So I had to make my mind or make a decision like, wow, what do I do now? Do I drop off architecture or say no to a contract with my band, or what's going to happen? So I have the fortune of having this amazing mother that's always enlightened. I don't know. I mean, she's, yeah, I'll tell you more of the story a little bit later, but she just came up to me and she said, well, it's great that you were signed with a record label, but I would recommend that you do both until you cannot do both. And I'm the type of person that don't give me a challenge because I'll just go and do that no matter what. So she just dropped that little seed in my brain. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do both. So I did both. It was interesting because I was doing architecture and then getting on a bus, going on tour, coming back, taking structural class or whatever class we were having in architecture back then. And it was very interesting for me because at some point, I mean, if I would have signed, I was 18 years old when I signed with the record company. So if you're 18 years old and you sign with a record company, that's your life. You can kind of like get a little bit mixed up, no? So I was having that life, but I was coming back to a classroom and sitting down with 20 students and talking about architecture. So it was always like, okay, this is something parallel to a real life. Not that that's not real, but this is something that rock and roll life and everything else is something that's temporary. So it always kept me grounded. I think it was a beautiful experience to understand that, okay, I can do that, but I can come back always and be in a classroom and or starting doing like the physical models or whatever was going on, which is very interesting because at some point, a couple of professors were very rude, very, very rude. They were like, why are you studying architecture? You're taking somebody's place. You're not going to be a professional architect. You're a musician. I can see your videos on MTV. And I would be like, why are you judging me if I'm doing some other stuff? I mean, judge me based on if I have the skills, if I'm qualified to be an architect, if I'm submitting my work correctly or not, but not because you turn on the TV and I'm playing a song there. It's like, and funny enough, when I finished architecture and started doing my things, the university hired me to teach in Iberoamericana. And I was seeing all these professors that once were telling me to drop to get out of school. And they're like, oh, I knew you were going to be an architect. We're so happy you're here. I'm like, oh, yeah, you bet. You were not happy when you had me as a student. So don't give me that now. But anyway, so I had a very awkward background for like a typical architect that became something interesting for many people abroad. So I started getting invited to give talks and talk about my work and how I would see architecture coming from a musical background, no? Which for people that are listening to us right now, it was interesting for me, even economically, because I was earning money from music. So when I started doing architecture and working with clients, it would be more about them letting me do the architecture that I wanted to propose rather than charging them a fee or an honorariums to do the architecture. So I'll be like, no, 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 just let me do this because I'm already earning money with my band. So it's okay. Just make sure that you put the money on the construction and we're going to have like a great project. And I think that was a beautiful leverage to have because sometimes when I've been teaching abroad or in many different places, talking to students, I always recommend never give up on your passion to do what you do. I mean, because if you want to pay the bills, I mean, sometimes people sacrifice what they know that they can do as architects to do something that they don't like at all, just to get some income and pay the fees of their office or whatever. And I would say, you know what? I would prefer working half time on something that gets you money so you don't sacrifice your passion on what you know you can do and what you can bring to the table for a client. Because I remember when I was partners with Isaac Broyd in, what was that? 1998. An incredible friend. Isaac Broyd was one of these architects who, to me, is responsible for bringing back modernity in Mexico, part of the generation of Alberto Calach and Enrique Norten. And I remember him saying once that, be careful the jobs you do, because if you're doing something that you don't like, but you're doing it like, nobody's going to know about this, you do that and then somebody else recommends you for that job and then you end up doing those jobs that you didn't want to do for the rest of your life. So I think it's very important to be true to your call. I mean, how do you think you as an architect with your vision of the world and the way you understand many things can bring to the table? And don't sacrifice that. Don't jeopardize that just because, again, I always said, well, I could go back to drumming, earn money from drumming and come back and just do the architecture that I really feel passionate and proud about and where I could be more of service to what I'm doing as an architect. But that's a little bit of the of the background. I don't want to go too far because I know you have more questions, Alex.
Well, you answered that very well. And you did cover a lot of the music and band relationships, which I really, really enjoyed because that's an interesting background to have. Most people coming to architecture, we all come from somewhat a artistic background, but you were confronted with two different life paths, two different careers. And you were told to like pick one, even though technically you can still kind of do both. You did what you felt you were most passionate about. So can you talk about how you got interested in architecture?
Oh yeah, when I was playing drums, the lead singer of the band, he's a producer, so he produces a lot of different artists. Well, he produced a lot of different artists back in the days, and the guitar player was a photographer. Now he's doing photograph for films and movies. So it was interesting because then what Alex was producing as a musical producer, Leon was taking photographs of the artists, and I was doing the record covers. So I started off kind of a graphic designer, and I did a couple of covers back in those days. And my brother, who is 8 years older than I am, he always has been a great mentor. No, I mean, my dad, of course, was an amazing mentor, but scientists, National Science Prize, my dad was almost never around. I'm the youngest of four brothers and sisters. So my brother kind of acted as a mentor to me. And he started working in real estate. And he was like, why would you want to be a graphic designer? Why don't you go into architecture? And I was like, why? It's like, well, as an architect, you can possibly do graphic design, but as a graphic designer, you cannot do architecture. And if you do architecture, maybe we can do stuff together in real estate. I'm like, okay. So I signed up for architecture without not even, I mean, I was not truly convinced or like, yes, I know I want to be an architect. And the interesting story is that because of the band and the music, and I started traveling a lot, I really started appreciating architecture in a way that I hadn't before. So I was just in school as we typically enter first semester and you don't sleep at all and you're going crazy, but you make friends and you hang on to whatever is going on. And again, I really liked doing everything that we were doing. I mean, I had some interesting professors. Not all of them wanted me out of the school, but there were some other great ones as well. But it truly was when I started traveling to different countries and places and seeing airports, infrastructure, public parks, how people reacted in different areas, whether they were outside in a plaza or in a park or in concerts. And I was like, wow, the power of architecture. This is intense. And I started recognizing how people felt in different areas, how architecture made them feel. No, if they were a bit more expressive on certain areas, or they were a bit more compressed and shy, depending on the size of the buildings or the width of the streets. So I believe that that combination of music and architecture was something very important for my upbringing.
I do find it interesting that the producer was the one who led you to art because, in a sense, music is an art and it connects with visual art, which is what you were experiencing when you were like looking at the graphics that he was like showing you. And when you finally started going into architecture, you started to experience buildings, which are like art that we inhabit. You were traveling and you were experiencing the way that everything moves. And I feel like that probably connected a lot to the way that music makes you feel, the way that architecture makes you feel, the way that you see graphic art is the same way you see architecture. They all connect in a way.
So totally. I mean, it's a matter of like how do you express yourself, no? So and just I mean, it's maybe easier to understand now, but back in those days, you weren't supposed to do many things. Back in those days, like what? You're not a serious musician because you're not just a musician, or you're not a serious architect because you're just an architect. I mean, your generation, you're DJ slash photographer, I don't know, foodie, gastronomical guru, whatever. So the more like tags you have on you, it's better. But back in those days, it was like, no, 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 you're betraying your career as an architect if you're also in a band. Or I was betraying my musician friends because I was studying architecture. So it was interesting to talk about this, saying like, but it's art, but you're expressing it through music, or you're expressing it through architecture, or if you're expressing it through graphic design. So it was not always just one thing. That now it's very common, but it's important to see the time when it happened, because again, now it would be like, oh yeah, you're doing many things, it's perfect. Oh.
With that type of labels and identity that people were trying to push on you, can you talk about your early career in architecture and what that looked like?
My first project was a refurbishment of an apartment of a friend of mine. We remodeled it and it was fun doing the project. I was very happy with the project. And after that, I remember a client looking for me because he has seen the apartment, and he came and looked for me and he's like, hey, you're an architect. Where's your office? I'm like, I don't have an office. I just have a computer. In fact, with my band, we were sponsored by Apple, by Macintosh back in those days. But I was given a computer to do music. And I'm like, no way. I'm going to use the computer to do architecture. And I had a Macintosh computer, so I couldn't use AutoCAD. So I started working with ArchiCAD, which was done for Mac computers. So I told my client, well, I just have this. This is my office, just my computer. So I started working with that first client, which was incredible. And at that point, I was already almost in the fourth album that we had done with the record company. So 4 tours, videos in MTV. I mean, we were traveling in Latin American countries. And I was like totally shocked. I'm like, really? You want me to do your house? I was flattered. I'm like, how do you know me? No, well, I just saw this. Okay, perfect. And at some point, I left the music industry because I said, okay, 4 albums, that's good. I already tried this life. It's amazing. I love music. I could still love music, but I think now I really want to take on architecture seriously, or more seriously than I was already enjoying the education of it. And once I went out and I started doing some projects, I started pushing away the music side and trying to not talk about it, because There were some clients that were like, "You're not an architect. I saw you playing drums in this band and you were popular and blah, blah, blah. So I don't trust that you're going to be able to do a project with us." So at some point, again, I just stopped talking about the music for a long time. And then it was also interesting because I was getting clients and then they would come to me saying, like, "Did somebody tell you that you look like the drummer of this band?" And I'm like, "Well, I am the drummer of that band, but I didn't want to tell you anything about it. So you don't get the wrong ideas in your head." And then again, you start doing projects, people start seeing your work, they start trusting what you do, they like your vision. Many, many years later, I said, "You know what? But that's who I am. That's part of me." So there's no sense of hiding the music aspect. I already have enough buildings for people to, if they want to come to us, perfect. If they don't, it's okay. But now you have things to prove, no? That you can do architecture with a certain vision, with a certain understanding of society and the problems and economics and politics and all sorts of things that come into play when you're doing architecture. So, yeah, it's been an incredible experience because I'm super thankful for having a musical career that I could just be living off that. No, like if I hadn't done architecture, just saying, "Well, yes, I was very famous during those times," and blah, blah. And I'm like, "Okay, that's gone. Now let's carry on to the next thing. This is architecture now." And I can speak about both, but it has totally shaped me and influenced me in a way where art in general has taken a very important role. So most of the times when I'm with colleagues or even with students, if we just talk about architecture, I think I could easily get bored. So the conversations go from film, music, literature. What are you reading? What's going on right now in the world? What is the political situation? How are we reacting to that? So it becomes much broader than just the shape of a building or what architecture can do. No, I always joke that yes, we can design a building which is beautiful, but the person who operates it is as important as the person who designed the building, because the life of the building depends on somebody that's going to be behind the building doing the day-to-day things. So it could be a great school, but if the school doesn't have a good curriculum and the teachers are not great, well, yes, it's a great building, but still, for me in today's world, everything has to come together to make things really a reaction of the times we're living today, no?
Some of the stuff that you talked about is the way people live. People live with art. People experience things. People go to art museums. People do music. People write. And you're talking about how all these come together and how, like, all these interests. I guess what I'm trying to say is I really like the connection that you have with art. Architecture can't live alone. The same way that you were saying that you can't just have art conversations about architecture. Everything connects in every way because that's just how we live. We don't live on just one thing. And that's also another thing that I find interesting about your background in music is that you also refuse to just identify with one identity. You know, life is about exploration
Yeah.
and it's about experiences. And I feel like you really push that in a lot of your beliefs.
I saw it from a very early stage in my life where everybody and we tend to pinhole a lot of things. If I can't put you in an envelope and put a seal to it saying like you're a rock band, you're a pop band, you're electronic music, or you're a contemporary architect who does residential, or you do government buildings, I'm like, I mean, we create. Don't label me. Don't try to put me in a tag that somebody can recognize. And I remember at the beginning, even talking about architecture in general, specializing in one field. I'm like, why? I don't want to do airports all my life. I don't want to do houses all my life. I want to do interesting projects with interesting clients. And it's been difficult because most people are like, but what's your specialty? You have to have a specialty. You have to be good at one specific field. And I'm like, I'm good at feeling how society is changing and how to give them a program that's appropriate. And it could be about art, it could be about education, it could be about sports facilities, it could be about mobility. That sense of awareness is broader than just pinholding. But I think it's I mean, just looking around us, no, even doctors, no, the cardiologist who specializes in heart but doesn't see overall health, no, or the liver guy, or the I don't know. Instead of like, who is a holistic doctor that can see you as a whole and understand you as a complete human being? So when I studied architecture to do architecture. I studied it not only to be a Mexican architect. I'm studying it in Mexico, but I want to be an architect in any part of the world. Just what are the tools to be an architect in any part of the world? Well, recognizing the history, recognizing the crafts of those certain places, recognizing their political situation, their geographical situation, their economy, everything else. And that again trained you to be a broader human being in terms of perception to all these things that come into play. I've always thought that staying only focused on the houses, and it's like, I don't know, it just feels a little bit constrained to all the many things that you should be paying attention to. And it's okay. I mean, I'm not saying that architects that are incredible residential architects or incredible airport designers are wrong. They're great, and their passion might be doing the best airport in the world 300 times over and over and over again. But it's not our case. And I love that when people come. And the other thing that I think has become important in the work that we're doing is that the design starts off as a strategy. The design is not a building. So when a client comes and he's like, what are we going to do for this project? And we sit down and we reformulate his question. His question would be, well, I was going to do this residential building. And I'm like, great, that the residential building is great. But when it touches the ground, you have a park in front. So what if we do double height at that space and we create a commercial area? So you have maybe restaurants that can serve the park, and it starts becoming a conversation. Most of the times, I could say maybe 90% of the times, we help the client reframe that question of what was the original program, not as arrogant architect, like, oh, you're wrong, you don't have to do a residential, you have to do a mixed-use building. We bring in specialists. We bring in sociologists, archaeologists, financial people, even policymakers sometimes, because if it had to do with government, how can we change a certain policy that we can go back to the government and work on the project? So I always tell my students, design starts with strategies. Design starts with strategic thinking of what could happen or what could make this better than just having a building, because otherwise, then you're just reacting to one aspect of it when it has to be many aspects that make architecture great. A quick example for that is I always joke with my friends that are industrial designers, but I say you can be the best industrial designer for, say, bottle caps, no? So you created like the best cap for this, and you specialized, I don't know how many years of your life to just do the cap that's perfect so the water doesn't leak. Yes, but you're not questioning, does this bottle contain water? Or you're doing caps for cyanide, or you're doing caps for alcohol, but you're doing the best caps. And you're just looking at the cap. So if you don't see the whole, you're not understanding what's it for. So we're so deep into one little thing and you can't see the broader picture, it becomes a problem, because you can have a great building in a super bad neighborhood, or you answered incredibly well a wrong question asked by the client. So sitting with him and reformulating that question and helping him understand what could be better is great. And we have to remember that architecture starts with the power of ideas, the power to imagine. If we don't really embrace that power to imagine all these possibilities, we're not really taking advantage of our full potential as not only designers, but as thinkers in general.
So I like that you're talking about your design philosophy and the way that you see architecture, because architecture is a broader picture. One building connects more than one thing. It connects physically, it connects the street, it connects everything that's around it, and it also impacts the neighborhood that it's in. So understanding your design philosophy, can you talk about what it was like to start your own firm?
Well, beginning my own firm, as I explained a little bit at the beginning, was sort of a word of mouth, one connecting me to the next person, to the next person. And at the beginning, because I was telling you that we arrive as a team with the client, with a sociologist and an economist and people that can change public policies, but that really built up after. No, at the beginning, it was me inviting maybe a landscape designer or an urban planner and telling him, come to the meeting. I'll buy you coffee after, but just give me some thoughts on this. And the client started feeling very comfortable that there were more people in the room and that I was willing to bring somebody else. And it was not just about the design and the object and the ego of the architect. It was really about making something better than how it was. No, so I think that at the beginning, of course, it was difficult. Sometimes trying to push ideas, because sometimes architecture has a bad reputation, no, of the architect wanting to do this thing and not listening to the client, no, because I joked that maybe the first projects that I had, and you're too young for this, but there was this Snoopy cartoon. But in those cartoons, you would never hear the adults. They were talking to the adults, and the adults just sounded like wah 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 wah, and you would just hear the kids talking, no, Snoopy and his crowd. So I remember the first projects, you're so obsessed about doing stuff that you have in your head as an architect that you're sitting down with the client and he's talking and you're just like, wow, 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 because you want to bring down this idea. And I started recognizing that. I'm like, no, 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 wait. You have to listen to what the person in front of you is really saying. So again, it started becoming this process of I want to learn more about how my mind thinks and my brain works and how I react to certain situations. So I've always done meditation. I mean, I come from this background of I told you my father was a scientist, National Science Prize, liver researcher, incredible intellectual man, recognized for what he was doing. And my mom went to the India to look for Sai Baba, her guru, and then Guru Mai. So it was like this science and spirituality, you know? So how do you bridge those when you're growing up and you have, again, we were four siblings all together in this crazy house of science and spirituality. But again, this notion of getting to know yourself and how you're reacting has always been a part of my upbringing, not only as an architect, but in life in general. I always understood that your practice is your life. Your practice is not a 6 a.m. yoga class, and it's not like 1 hour meditation. So recognizing these things that I was saying about listening to a client and not paying attention, it's like, no, 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 wait, let's focus on the real things that are there and even listening to the client, but catching what is really important, no? And what is missing out of that conversation that he's saying. So then again, these friends that I would bring in, the urban planner that could see more about the urban conditions, or the sociologist that would know about certain things that were happening around the area, would give me some insight. And that just became a way of doing architecture. It was not just grabbing a pen and designing a building. And that just, I mean, it started growing. And I also learned the importance of saying no to a couple of things that I didn't feel were the right things to do. When you had a client that wanted to do something that was very greedy and he just wanted to do more square meters and he didn't care about the neighborhood. And it's like, no, I don't think we're the right office for you to come and work with us. No, we don't agree with your values and your moral ways of seeing things. No, so in a very gentle way, not saying like get out of my office. No, but like no, we're not a match. Go find some other firm. But I think that really made a difference. And this is where I was saying you can say no if you have an economical way of bringing money to your office. So again, my advice has always been be able to say no when it doesn't jeopardize your economy because you have another way of just bringing money to your office. And again, I mean, you see that in a lot of actors that they're part-time waiters and they're waiting for a good role as an actor. I'm like, well, that's a good method that if it doesn't betray what your true passion is. And again, I mean, we've turned down many projects that we didn't feel comfortable. One of the last ones was a big aquarium where they wanted us to do an aquarium. We said we don't believe in having trapped animals within a space. And I know, I mean, if you're helping them and there's more about educational issues on terms of study and that, I mean, yes, but just having animals trapped for people to see right now, to me, it doesn't work. No, so I would rather reinvent what an aquarium looks like. And we talked about back in the days, Bjarke Ingels, and we had a client that wanted to do an aquarium. We said, wow, wouldn't it be cool to have a research center in land and then an acrylic tube that would span inside water, I don't know how many kilometers, and the person that's trapped is the human. So you're in this acrylic or glass environment, and you can watch the natural species move around in the ocean, but you're the one that is locked in, not the animals, no? And again, it was a way of like, can we rethink? Can we reinvent? Why are we repeating typical patterns? Why are we conditioned as architects like this is an office building and this is a house and who's the house for? So I think it's important as well the way the office of any architect is growing to keep on questioning these things for sure.
Yeah, it's kind of like you're updating the way people live
Exactly.
because we've been stuck in the same way for so long. And so it's time to do something new, keeping up with the times. Why is architecture still the thing that kind of stays the same when it should also be evolving? Thinking about the spaces that we're inhabiting and how they shouldn't be always the same thing that we're used to just because we're used to it. And I think that's really cool. I really like the example of the aquarium and how like it could be underwater and you guys really stick with your beliefs. You stick with what you believe and you don't stray from that and you understand the power of denying someone a service because you believe so strongly in something.
And I think that the important thing is if you've worked on yourself, if you know that there's things that you can change from your beliefs that don't serve you well anymore, that comes from deep work on yourself. That comes from really sitting down and knowing like what are the versions of yourself that really are beneficial for you and which other ones you don't need anymore, and how do you work on that, and who's your people around you, no? If you're going to therapy or your friends or whatever, just makes the environment for you to be able to upgrade yourself, no? And in the same way, if you're constantly working on yourself, you're looking for those things happening outside. How are you constantly surrounded by people that can see the same as you're recognizing that doing today a typical house for a father and a mother and who's going to have a boy and a girl is not the typical family anymore, no? And we should challenge, why are we doing the same typologies? Why are we doing the same concert venues when things are changing so much? So again, as you're mentioning, we have all this technology that's constantly upgrading and upgrading and upgrading. And for some reason, a lot of things are not upgrading. It's like, why not? If things are changing so much. And again, one of the most important things I always tell my students is just look around. Just look around how people interact today, how they interacted when you were younger, and how will they interact tomorrow. Is there more technology involved? Are they more social? Are they more retracted? How is the mental issue going to affect us all? Because I think that it's crazy to think that as a human species, we can really understand the economical crisis of a pandemic, but we could not recognize the mental damage that is now in our society. But pay attention to that. We're more keen on, yeah, the economic thing will be, they know how to count it even to the last zero and dots. And we don't know really the mental damage out of the things that are going on in the world right now. And that's scary because that shows us where society is, no? And what we're paying attention to.
That is true. And I did like what you said about like designing for the future. And the next question has to talk about the cultural context, like responding to the cultural context. What is your design process and approach to project, especially when they are at different scales?
I think we're not scared, or scale is not really relevant to us at the beginning. The questions are the relevant aspects, no? Like again, the economical aspect, the geographical aspect, the crafts. What is the population around that? What do they do? No, so what we ask more of kind of these questions, and it becomes. It's been almost maybe 15 or 16 years that we introduced a pre-stage in our contracts. I mean, most of the contracts are schematic design, concept design, DD, CD, construction administration, and we have a workshop, an envisioning stage for the project. So before we start working on the project, the client wants to hire us to do a hospital or whatever, and then we say, yes, let's do the envisioning aspect first. We bring in all the group together, and then we put his idea at the center of the table, and everybody takes a shot at it. And we start saying, well, yes, it could be a hospital, but what if, blah, blah, blah. And it starts growing in many ways, which is beautiful. And most of the times, I could say, again, maybe 90% of the times, it does change from the initial project, no? Or I mean, we're working on a master plan, for instance, right now that in a beach here in Mexico, in Oaxaca, Puerto Escondido, and the master plan was just doing houses. And I'm like, what about, I mean, can there be a fish market? Can we start educating fishermen to have a more sustainable fishing? Can we do a community center? Can we start doing this? So, and the client's like, I'm like, of course, because if I want to buy a house, I'd rather buy a house if there's a community center that I know that I'm helping the local community. And if there's education for the fishermen, so it starts building up and the client starts getting excited and we bring more people into the project. And then I've always said that the best position, at least for me with a client, is when you become more his advisor than his architect. Because as an advisor, you're bringing in all these ideas and the power to make the project better. That when I'm just the architect, he can just change the architect whenever he wants. No architect is like, oh, well, my cousin just finished architecture and I just want to give him a chance to to do the architecture, or I found somebody that charges less, or I like more this, and you're like kind of disposable, and it's crazy. But when you're bringing in all of these ideas that create, or you're designing the strategy, it would be crazy to drop you off. You're bringing in so much more interesting things to his project, making it richer in so many ways. And I think that's the power of our office. No, when people come in, it's funny because they're like, well, we have this idea, but what can you do for us? Even, I mean, we've done stuff for department stores that would be very boring to many architects. Like, no, I don't want to do a department store. I just want to do museums and cultural projects. But we take on things that we think we can change their perspective on what they're doing and saying like, well, you're a department store, but you could do much more, no? So the building that we did, for instance, in Surgentes, it's a department store, but we have a 3 meter width facade, no? So it's a habitable facade where we said instead of having mannequins and Mother's Day sale and all these like crappy things that you always see in department stores, like why don't you activate it? Why don't you have a CrossFit class? Why don't you have a reading station? Why don't you have many things happening? So the restaurant pops out and you see people walking in the facade instead of having this closed facade towards the street. Because I mean, department stores became very boring. They were just warehouses. You would just see no window at all. People would not look out or look in. So again, even if it's these small things where we can push a company to think differently and do different things. We did also a grocery store with a company here in Mexico that would be a little bit like your Whole Foods in the US. They invited us to redesign or to design one of their new buildings. And we said, yes, but we want to use your rooftop. And the whole intention, these guys were close to Toluca, where there's a lot of farmers. And most of these farmers don't have any income anymore because the government stopped buying their produce. So I said, well, why don't you become a host for all these farmers that can't sell their produce anymore? Invite them to your rooftop to sell their produce on the rooftop. And if they're good farmers, then you start creating all these bonds with them and start selling their produce underneath in the regular store. And again, it was taking a known company as an excuse to connect to some social aspect that's not working in our community. But again, you could not see all this if you're not paying attention to all the aspects, no? If you're only seeing like how the building is going to look like and the design of the mullion next to the, yes, I mean, those things are super important. And we love that as architects, but there's much more that we're missing out if you don't look at the bigger picture. No?
That is pretty cool. And I really like how you did connect the whole economical and political. It's like by building a building or a space, by building a space, you are also connecting a lot of people, a lot of businesses, and there's more than one person benefiting from a building. And again, it's like designing for the future and to help people. And actually, I remember from your lecture at IIT, you talked about sustainability and regenerative design. And it was probably one of the things that stuck out to me the most. I know you did mention how you didn't really like the word sustainability because it should just be design. But can you talk about how you put those design ideas into practice?
Yes. Well, first of all, I joke and I'm very sarcastic when we talk about sustainability because I really truly believe that there's not many things that we can sustain. I mean, if we keep on going in this direction, we're doomed, no? And we know that. So I think it became kind of a trend to say sustainability when I think we need to talk about regenerative. And we need to have a way of thinking that's more about reciprocity. You guys in the US are great at tagging phrases, no? So this leave no trace became something like, oh, yeah, let's leave no trace. That's the mentality. That's sustainable. And I don't think that's sustainable anymore. You have to leave it better. Leave no trace doesn't work anymore. So when you come into a place, if you don't make it better, it doesn't work. So I think we need to. I see a lot of companies talking about sustainability, but that's like the cruise ship that everybody's going behind these companies. And we need to be like this little speedboat that goes in a different direction, saying, guys, you're wrong. You're going in the direction of we need to be regenerative. We need to talk about reciprocity. We need to talk about if the land is giving us something so we can build there, what are we giving to the land? First of all, then what are we giving to the people of that community? So that becomes a way of understanding our relationship in general. But that's not only as architects, that's in general as human beings, no? If you're in a relationship where it's only giving, and nobody's giving you back, it's not going to work. Or if you're taking and taking and taking, the other person is going to also run out of the room. So I think that the importance of understanding that we need to reframe most of our values and things that we thought were correct. But when I say questioning our beliefs, it's the same thing. What we're in us as humans, our beliefs, yes, but what about society's beliefs? What about countries' beliefs? Can we argue and can we challenge those and can we change those? You don't have to do all these big moves. You can start with little moves and create examples saying like, guys, look, wait, raise your hand. And another great example, for instance, with this master plan, and this is something that I've been pushing with private developers, no? When we're doing master plans for residential and different things, it's like, okay, the person buying the land, what's his commitment? Can he come with the money and just buy the land and do his house? Or we're going to ask him to participate in the community. So there's a money thing, but there's also an investment thing of like, how do you want to get involved? There's many issues within this master plan. that you can get involved with the community, whether teaching, whether farming, whether you're this great person that has a lot of things to share with this community. Perfect. Then we want you in that community. If you're just going to buy and just be a guy that doesn't care about anything and it's like, do we really want to have you in this place? Or so again, we have to understand that for real change to happen, we all have to be responsible for that. It's not one person or two person. So making the developer responsible, but the community responsible, the people buying responsible. So it becomes this thing of not a weight of responsibility, but a way of acting where it's like, again, reciprocity, the new era of reciprocity, understanding what it really means and how are we handling our relationships in general.
You're talking about regenerative design. And actually, I want to, for the sake of time, also, I want to talk about one of the buildings that you designed in the US. Can you talk about the experience designing the Ledger building as your first project in the United States?
Well, it's interesting as a background. I'll tell you a little story. No, I have many friends in the US and a lot of people that want to work with us, but they were like, oh, no, we can't work with you because you haven't worked in the US. You wouldn't know how to work here. You're probably not going to have anything interesting as an architect to do here in the US because here we have all these regulations and we have all these liability issues and blah. I'm like, guys, but there's amazing architecture in the US and there's great buildings that really challenged the status quo and they created like great things. So when we got the opportunity to do the Bentonville project, I loved it because first of all, we had Marlon Blackwell working with us, which Marlon is an amazing, first a friend, second a colleague, one of these colleagues that the least we talk about is architecture. We talk more about life in general and our kids and places to go and philosophy of life and again, books and more things. So the building is a collaboration between three offices. Haruka and Christian, who have Callahan Hoyuchi, Marlon Blackwell, and our office, Rojkind Arquitectos. And we went to Bentonville, and when we landed, the client put us on bikes. So he's like, if you want to understand the community, you have to get on a bike, and we have to go biking. So we went biking, and we started seeing the experience through the eyes of the client. The scale where you're biking, which you're not going so fast that it's a car, you're able to see all the incredible designs of roads that they had created for mountain biking. Really serious, not just a dirt path. No, they were creating or designing all these trails for biking because they want to convert Arkansas on the most important bikeable community in the world. So you would fly to Bentonville as you would fly to any ski resort and just get on your bike. And people are doing that. When they put us on bikes, I remember that experience was amazing. We said, we have to do something with the bikes. And at some point we said, well, let's do a bikeable building. And the client was like, what are you talking about? And it was saying like, well, we can do a bikeable building. We have to just figure out the ramps, the width, the slope, everything, no? And you have to have a client that's crazy enough to follow you. so so he said, well, that sounds nice. So we started designing the building and it worked in many beautiful ways. When you see the building is 6 stories high, but the surrounding neighborhood is churches and houses. So it's very low density. So the ramps helped us in a way to push the building back. So the facades to the front of the streets became more friendly because they were a smaller scale. So we said, okay, this is where we need to go in, connect to the park behind it, start working the ramp from the back, then go to the front of the building and have the switchbacks in front of the building, pushing the building back. Of course, economically, you're taking away square feet of the building because, I mean, the upper part of the building is the smallest footprint, which to some clients should be the biggest footprint because that's the one that sells the most. But here we were saying, well, if the street is going all the way up to the building, every client renting the space inside has street front. Every client has a way of accessing through this ramp going up the building. You're seeing people coming up and down. But there's also an ask to all these people that are renting the space because you have terraces. And we started to question, well, can you have a coffee shop on the fourth floor? Can you have a donut thing? Or can you have a juice bar or something that really becomes an active street? We had all this amazing conversation. Again, Haruka and Christian, the other firm that worked on the project, they were incredible at asking all these things. And once we finished the building, they were responsible for designing the interiors of the building as well. Christian and Haruka are amazing colleagues that I met while we were helping WeWork at a certain stage of their life as a company. So again, questioning the building from the inside out. And another aspect that was beautiful is that once we had the ramps, I wanted to introduce the client to a friend of mine, Stefan Sagmeister, who's an amazing graphic designer, to add some art to the ramp. So they love the idea because Bentonville is also very driven by, they have the Moshe Safdie Museum there, the Crystal Bridges. They're very open to anything that's about art, culture, education in general. So they invited Stefan, and Stefan did a piece where he did a study about the critters in Bentonville, the area. So he designed these critters that are carrying jewels at the bottom of the rafts, different critters. They're made in glass, produced in Germany, that they're beautiful pieces. And once you go up, all the jewels create a phrase. And the phrase that you see when you get up to the building, to the main space, it says, now is better, because he has this whole philosophy that even though we have all this immediate news and we think that the world is worse now, he's always very optimistic, and he has statistics that show that now is much better than before. No, that we've advanced as society. But anyway, so doing that building, I think it was interesting to, at least for me, to do a building that could be a building with a character, no, a building that could say something just besides holding office space, because it's 200,000 square feet of office space, but it became a totally different experience because you can bike up the building and you can engage in conversations. And if the building is not open yet or the offices are not in working hours, people still skate up the building and down the building. There's a guy who skates every morning. People see them and know this guy, and people are like, oh, the guy in the neighborhood, or people with strollers. And it's become a great building. And to me, it was a way of showing that you can do a fun building and you can do something interesting rather than just all these boxes that you see in most places as a result of people saying you cannot do this. No, it's very strict, or the budget is this. But we're happy with the result.
So I think that's so cool, first of all. I like biking a lot. So to be able to bike up a building would be probably a very crazy experience. And I like it because it's not your traditional building. It's not something you would, I don't think that many people would have ever thought of it, or like they would have thought of it as like something that never could actually happen. Like, imagine I could bike up to the top of this building, but that's not something that we ever thought could happen. And I feel like that's what makes architecture, at least especially your work, it makes it really unique because of the fact that it's really outside of the box. It's, again, bringing people closer to the building. Or when it was introduced to you, it was supposed to be only for offices. But now the building, after being designed, it's for everybody in the community. Anyone can bike up the building and can bike back down. So everybody can go and grab their coffee. People can go for their morning walks and go out with their strollers. It's more than just an office building now. And I think that that's something that's become very apparent, especially in this conversation, and your beliefs about a building meaning more than just what its program and purpose is.
And asking always, what can the building do? I think that's a very fair question. What can the building do for the community? Not only for the pocket of the investor, not only for a specific function, because any project, even a school that you're saying, well, yes, it's about education. Yeah, but you're educating the people inside the building. What is it doing to the outside? Can it educate the people to the outside as well? Can a private house do something for the outside? It doesn't matter the economy of the house. You can have a little bench outside, and the wall can have a little bench for people to sit outside the house that might need to just sit down for 2 seconds because they're tired of walking. So every project can give a little bit back to its community. It doesn't matter the scale, it doesn't matter the program. And imagine if every project did something towards the outside and to their community, we would have much better cities for sure.
Yeah, I agree. Architecture is alive in a sense. It has a purpose. It needs to do more than just help the people inside. It's supposed to connect everything around it on the outside too, and not just with the facade. So I really like the way that you do think about architecture. And I actually want to jump into your teaching career because while you're doing all this stuff, you're still teaching. You've been a professor at many institutions. So how do you see the future of architecture and how do you approach that when teaching?
Well, first of all, I think that education is very important. No, I love connecting with students. I love connecting with how do they see the world through their perspective. So all these conversations about the new generations, no, and it's very enriching for us as professors. I mean, a lot of professors can tell, yeah, it's great to teach. Yeah, but we also get a lot of great things, not only from our colleagues and talking to the other studios and seeing what they're doing, but really there's great conversation with students. And every time I'm teaching, I always say, guys, this could be a space for a lot of really incredible conversations. So let's use the space. It's not just about doing a project. It's about sharing your ideas and questioning a lot of different things as a team, because when you're teaching, it kind of becomes this team effort, no, for everybody. In our case, teaching, but in the case of the students, of course, doing your work. But the richer the conversations, the richer the studio. And you can have a great studio because all the conversations were amazing and you shared books and you talked about many aspects of life in general that created great projects. Or the studio can be very boring sometimes because everybody just is very introverted and doesn't want to share to their neighbors or talk to them. It's like take advantage of a space where you can have thoughts and you can have ideas and you can start constructing thoughts that construct architecture. No? So again, I mean, it's been great. I couldn't do it full time. I'm a professor maybe every year and a half or every 2 years when I get invited to certain universities. Of course, I've taught in all the ones in Mexico, in Europe, the US. I was a visiting professor at UPenn and SciArc, Harvard, with you guys at IIT. And it's great. To me, it becomes another project. So it's not something easy to do because I don't have something that I repeat in every studio. It's like, okay, new university, new studio, new project. So it's like thinking of like what could be a good thing to do. And the last one that I did there at the IIT was this thing about beyond sustainability. I mean, not only talk about reciprocity, but how do you show projects that talk about reciprocity? How do you have a studio where we're always thinking of what the buildings are giving back? How do we become a thermometer for society in the places we are to understand what they're going through? And if architecture can serve a purpose bigger than itself as a building to serve community. So again, I think it's very important to understand that that reciprocity mindset is also a way of teaching. No? I hope that at the end of the day, the most important things that they can keep as students is this thinking, not the design of the door and the height of the building. I mean, they'll get great at their craft. They're going to be working on that and they'll figure stuff out, but more the sensitivity towards the approach of architecture. And again, the power to imagine all these different possibilities, no? And maintain that curiosity of a child that is always asking, like, what if we do this? What if we do that? Because sometimes when we're growing up, we become so boring, no? We stop asking questions and we think we know all the answers. And that's when I think that there's no more growth for you as a as a person. If you think you know it all, because we don't know nothing, no?
I do like how you talked about the approach to architecture. It's like trying to bring out their mindset on architecture, like bring out the ideas, beliefs, and conversations and allow them to value those conversations so that they can see architecture more than just their portfolio. And then they design based on the ideas that they're getting from other people. So, in that case, what piece of advice was given to you that influenced you, and what advice would you give to other designers?
I mean, I learned it maybe from different aspects, from the music industry or from friends that were filmmakers, that one of the most important things you can do is understand the way you are seeing life in general. Because at the end, more than your style of something that you're doing, they're going to come to your office for the way you see the world and for the way you're seeing things. When I'm in a studio, I'm always encouraging students like, well, where did you come from? Well, I'm from India. Tell us how you see things in India and share with us how you see the world. Where do you come from? What makes you you? What makes you see the world through your eyes? And if you're from India and you're right now here in the US, how do you react with all this background that you have in the US to do a project? Because again, when I told you I studied architecture in Mexico to become an architect in any part of the world, yes, but what makes me or has made me a Mexican and the way I see the world is going to influence a lot of the way that I can come into a new place and see what they're doing and design a building. Because maybe I couldn't have done a playful building as the Bentonville building to bike on if I wouldn't have all this background that I have as a Mexican. We have a country that's amazing. The people are amazing, but there's always this flavor of playfulness that you see around the things that happen and the chaos of Mexico City and the craziness. But again, it's like, how do you bring yourself to a project? Your way of seeing, not in the ego way that how do you bring yourself, no, but how do you bring your perspective on life and the way you've been educated and the way you understand how your brain is working and how do you bring down ideas from your mind to the drawing and then to the drawing to the computer and then to the construction side. So again, like work on things that make you you, that make you be the person that is having this experience in life, understanding everything that you're seeing and having the tools to put it down into projects and design or the things that you do. Because again, I don't see any difference on being a father and doing architecture. No, it's the approach and the way I'm growing up with my daughter and our conversations is who I am. So that coherence of me having this experience is the same in architecture. And most of the time, when you're growing up or studying architecture, you want to become this type of architect or this other type of architect. And you're already choosing the clothes to look like that type of architect. And it's like, just grow into it. Feel comfortable in your clothes and feel comfortable in your body and feel comfortable in the conversation with a client, convincing him of what is the best vision for the project, no? And taking them on that journey where it's not about the ego, it's not about his money, it's about what is the best project that can give back to a community or to the city. And that takes time. I think that would be a good piece of advice, no? Like understand where you're coming from and what are you putting inside your brain? What are you reading? What are you listening to music? What are the conversations that you're having? And in that sense, that's to me the most important aspect rather than working on your office 24 hours a day. No, it's like how much do you work on yourself to really understand how to make your mind produce better things? How are you more in service as a human being in the work that you're doing if you're not paying attention to where you are? And yeah, didn't want to get too philosophical, but
I like that. It's like it's deeper and it has to connect to the designer, and the designer has to know how to connect to their life in a sense. I like that a lot.
because at the end, I mean, we're giving a task, no? And you have to do rural housing for maybe after the earthquake. Yes, you need to do a house, but who is doing the house? And how do you engage with the people there? How's the communication? So again, you come in with, you know how to do, you have the skills of the architect, but the human aspect of who you are is what ends up bonding with the people that are there, no? And again, you're not trying to do project that you're inventing a certain situation. To me, it's about coherence. I mean, I remember appreciating the most amazing musicians that I met during my musical stage were the ones that were more coherent. The way they spoke was the way they acted on stage and was the way they produced music. And you would see this incredible line of that person, no? And then I would see some other people, they were great musicians, but they were not really good people. And I would be like, oh, well, the music is nice, but this guy's not a very nice person, no? And he treats people really badly. And just make sure that besides working on the office, you're working on yourselves.
I do want to wrap this episode up. So I have one more question. And you've done so many things already. You've had different career paths, and everything has kind of merged together in a way. So, what are your future plans and goals?
Well, what we're working on now, which is a beautiful project that you'll hear more about, it's something that I wanted to do a long time ago, and it just happened to merge with the right people at the right time. I helped WeWork at some point, no? So I was brought in as a senior vice president to help them do their ground up buildings. When they were already buying land, it was how do we come up with new typologies? Again, questioning like what is a office building? But after the rise and fall of the company, I became good friends with Miguel McKelvey, one of the founders. It's Adam Newman and Miguel. With Miguel, we were thought of many different things to do, and I shared with him one idea that I had that I really wanted to work on something for the elder population. That started growing, and we're reinventing assisted living or retirement homes. We're not going to call them retirement homes anymore. We're not going to call them assisted living. We want to change our relationships to the elder population because we don't think that old people should be thrown out, that they're not useful anymore. We think that we have to really work on why that happens. No, why do we think that when you have a beautiful generation growing old that also wants to be part of the whole community? So when you talk about to people that are over 50, 60, 70, whatever, they're like, I don't want to go to a retirement home. I don't want to go and die in a place where it just feels depressing, even though it has a garden, no? So we're creating these social clubs for people over 50. And the idea is that you can have a membership once you're 50. If you're younger, you can come and visit and enjoy the talks. And of course, there's going to be great food and everything else. But the social club is going to have all these additional aspects where you can start adding things to your membership as medications, or you can start adding things to your membership if you want to live in the place. But the vibe is going to be totally different. It's going to be a place where it is about community, it is about having a school when you're an elder where you can still continue having education, where it's not just a pottery class or just something that takes a little bit of your time. It's like there's a real curriculum for adults at a certain point. So we're working with different companies right now, putting everything together. But I think it's going to be right now with all this new concept that they're calling the silver tsunami about this elder population that has certain economy. It's going to be a really interesting place. We're going to try to figure out all the things that we've done wrong as a society and how we can make one of these places come back to really nourishing an elder population that doesn't want to be spit out of a society. So you'll hear more about that, but that's a project that's deep in my heart. And I'm talking about doing something for, I mean, I'm 50, I'm turning 55 this year. So it's a place where me and my friends are already thinking like, where would we want to be when we are growing older? No, it's like, yeah, I don't want to stop talking about art and culture in general. And I want to be doing all these amazing adventure trips. So why don't we create that space for us if we are going to be those elders at a certain point? So excited about that. You'll hear more.
I think that's so cool. I feel like all the work that you do is really cool. It's like reinventing the way that people live. Something I've also learned from this conversation is sustainability is just a way that people create architecture that doesn't continue hurting people. But regeneration is architecture that begins to heal. It's growing people and it's healing people and it's also healing a society as a whole, psychologically and economically. So I have learned a lot from this conversation. I do want to thank you so much for being here today. It was a pleasure to have this conversation with you. And I know that the others listening will also appreciate this conversation.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you, Caleb. And great to be here. Great to be able to talk. And again, hope to see more of the IIT in the future and some great students coming out of the amazing university that I love so much. And I love my colleagues there. So thanks for having me. And I hope you enjoyed the podcast.
I want to thank everyone who's listening. We release our episodes monthly. You can find us on your favorite podcast platform. You can also follow us on Instagram at Beyond the Surface _Nomas IIT. I want to thank our producer, Kayla Kwok, and the Nomas IIT team for making this podcast possible. Thank you for listening to this episode of Beyond the Surface featuring Michel Rojkind. Until next time, goodbye.